Good evening, Jacob Field speaking. Just having a quick sound check before we get started. I'll just wait around a couple more moments just for any late arrivers. If you can just confirm in the chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen that you can see and hear me correctly, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, let's jump right in. I've heard from a few of you that have mentioned in the chat bar that you can see and hear correctly, so I'm going to assume that's the case, and let's get started. So we are going to be joined tonight by a very special guest, an investor just like yourselves, who's been doing some awesome things in the last year or so. He has been actually investing for almost or around 20 years, so it's all happening in the last few months. And we're going to hear about how he's been traveling, what he's actually been achieving, how he's been doing it, and really breaking it down into actionable plans for us. So I'm really excited to have Guy on the line tonight and to be able to pick his brain together. He's a wealth of information, so it's a real privilege to be able to do so. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we do jump right in. If you're having issues with the visuals, a little bit blurry tonight, try adjusting the resolution of your browser window. A little bit smaller sometimes clears it up. If you do have any, if you do have any issues with things buffering or slowing down, potentially try the reconnect button at the bottom of your page. And I did have a viewer, Kate, on the line last webcast who did mention you can actually watch this via the feed, Jacob Field via Ripehouse. The Jacob Field feed on YouTube, and it's crystal clear coming through there. So it can actually be viewed as a Google Hangout via YouTube if you are savvy and able to check that out if you do have any problems with the audio visual. So let's jump right in. We've got lots to get through tonight. We're really looking forward to an extended Q&A session at the end. But plenty of content to get through beforehand. So just a little bit of housekeeping where we're at. Lots been happening as usual around the Ripehouse traps the last week or two since our last webcast. We've just released the May version of our Pinpoint Predictions Report. 11 council areas covered, 22 suburbs analysed within. That is for all of you familiar with your dashboard. That is now available for viewing and download within your dashboard. The link has been uploaded there. Pop me through an email or get in touch via the live chat for the link. We're happy to send that through. We have been covering, as usual, also at the Frontier Investor extension, which is where you can find interesting content for DIY investors, how you can actually learn and structure and strategize towards your property goals. So that's over at thefrontierinvestor.com.au. It is powered by Ripehouse. We have our research driving a lot of the storylines and content on that site. and we have some amazing contributors. Guy's story is actually covered in a lot of detail there on the Frontier Investor. There is actually an article that was posted today by Corey Batt, who's a financial planner over in Adelaide, and he went into a lot of detail about potentially how to structure and organise a large portfolio from a finance or mortgage point of view. So interesting reading there. We are going to be going to and covering off a few major themes with Guy tonight around how he got started, how he got over that barrier and initially started investing, the nuts and bolts around how he structures finance, and potentially, how he actually manages these properties remotely, how he sources them and appraises them and negotiates. If you've got any questions, jump into the chat bar at any time on the right-hand side of your screen. If they're really pertinent to what I'm talking about, I will get in there and answer them at the time. Otherwise, I'll collect them all up at the end. So definitely stick around for the extended Q&A tonight. We're going to be also, Guy and I are going to be going back and forth, actually looking at some current areas that are recommended in our growth pinpoint predictions report for May, doing some suburb, street and property analysis, and then we're going to be really, getting Guy's opinion on a few properties, trying to leverage some of his expert negotiation skills, because he's left my mouth open a few times with some of the deals he's got done. That's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to really getting in and having at the end of this some individual properties that you can see how I've got there. You can go away, you can rinse, repeat, and you can gain the confidence to do this together. Just before we jump in, I have had a quick poll there at the start of this evening. Big shout out from all of you in the Hunter Valley. Hello from the Hunter Valley. Guy's actually tuning in not far from you tonight, up there towards Lake Macquarie. I'm down here in Tasmania. It's a lot colder in this neck of the woods at the moment. 54% of you have been tuning in tonight from New South Wales, 19% from Victoria, 11% from Queensland. A few of you from South Australia, WA, Northern Territory, ACT. So quite a nice mix. Big shout out all over the country. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jacob Field, and I did found Ripe House in 2011, and I've been investing since I was a teenager for almost 15 years. Currently own property from across Australia. And I'll describe myself as a DIY property investor, which I think that's probably how Guy would describe himself. And it's really, it's an amazing honour to have Guy on the line tonight. Thank you for joining us, Guy.
It's a pleasure to be here. Lovely to be here, Jacob.
Look, there's so many. I'm really looking forward to be able to ask you questions. I've been taking questions via email from investors wanting to know certain things, and that's guided how we can sort of proceed with things tonight. But thank you for providing your time and opening things up. I think people are going to get a lot out of it.
Yep, lovely to be here.
Just for those that don't know, so Guy's been investing for around 20 years. Is that right?
Yes, Jacob. So I arrived in the country back in 1990 from the UK, and bought my first property in 1996, which was actually a unit in Harbord, which has now become Freshwater on the northern beaches. I'm at Beacon Hill, which is also on the northern beaches, and so that first property was bought back in 1996. At the time, it was $149,000, which seems like an absolute and total bargain now. But at the time, back in 1996, I remember that was actually a lot of money, and I remember my wife and I sort of wondered how much could we go to 149. We offered 145, and went to 147. We ended up paying 149 for that back in 96. And so we sort of stumbled into investing, and I remember being there in the unit at the time, and the tenants were there, and my wife and I were renting in Manly, and got talking to the tenants, and they mentioned they were paying $290 a week in rent, which was actually more than we were paying ourselves to be in Manly. And so naive as I was back then, I thought, oh well, look, if we're paying whatever we were to 260, you're paying 290, we're going to be 30-40 bucks ahead here. So so that's how I sort of stumbled into that in 1996. That was the first one. And then
it's a bit of a funny sort of comment, because property investing, I was probably 5 years later, but it was a different sort of story back then, in terms of it wasn't covered as much. You sort of didn't talk about it with friends, or it wasn't out there in the media, or it was something you sort of you just have that moment. And I read, for me, it was when I was 16 or 17 reading Jan Summers' book and going, wow, that's a really nice way to use other people's money, and you can stack one after the other, and it was like one turns into two, turns into four, potentially, etc. But that was the only way you could sort of source that information at the time from memory. But this also
I do
relates
remember
to
actually, Jan Summers was actually the book that my father-in-law gave me, probably in about 1994, 95, and so that was the same book that I've read, and I thought, well, that doesn't seem too hard. So there weren't an awful lot of books and things around at that time. So
no, there weren't. Yeah. In terms of your day job, Guy, we'll cover off a little bit more information about it later, but Guy's actually a management and business coach via the trainingguys.com.au, and obviously a very keen property investor. And I think you mentioned your property portfolio is sitting at 35 properties at the moment.
Well, we're actually at 37 now. So put an offer on a property actually on Monday, and so we've got 14 days for the building and pest and 14 days for finance. So assuming that all plays out, that'll be property 37. So
great.
So, yeah.
No, as I type, they keep incrementing.
Yeah. Although you asked me about how I started, and I do want actually to stress to people that I bought my first one in 1996. Didn't actually buy the second property until 1998. The third one until 2000. So the first few years, it was a very sort of gradual, slow process. I think when people sort of see, oh, Guy bought 10 in the last 10 months. But 20 years ago when I started, it was just one. I got comfortable with that and bought another one, got comfortable with that. And it wasn't, in fact, until I think 2003 that I actually bought more than one in 1 year. So it did take me quite a long time just to sort of, really get comfortable. And it was always, and I think I mentioned this to you before, the sort of the sleep at night factor of just getting one, getting comfortable, and then moving to the next one. I think some people feel they've got to go out and buy sort of 5 or 6 in a go, which would scare anyone off, I think.
I started off a little bit differently. I bought my second property about 4 months after my first.
Right.
They were very cheap down here in Hobart at the time, and I had a first home buyers grant, so I lived in the first one for a little bit and did a bit of a reno, but it was 145 and then rented for 240 straight off the bat when I needed to. And then I thought that was quite easy and was able to get into the second one. Having said that, then it was 4 or 5 years until I bought the next after that. So I went off and lived the early part of my 20s then. So so it's definitely in that. And to be honest, that was it was sort of dumb luck, and it was pretty close to the family home, etc., where I bought. So it was the wrong part of the cycle, and etc., and I learned a lot. So it doesn't just sort of get to this point, but once you sort of you get a bit of a formula going, which we can go into. It's something that you can really repeat.
Exactly.
The first slide I've got here, just to go into, we'll probably cover off a little bit of it already, in just your investment journey. And I think that realization for you around the why was just, well, this makes sense financially to be able to hold an asset and cash flow. But then something like Jane Summers' book and how she structures it, was that another big part of the investment mechanism itself and choosing it, or?
Yes, look, it was. I mean, I think I had a number of things going on. I didn't go into it with the intention of retiring in 2 or 3 years' time. I was very happy in the day job, still am happy in the day job. So it wasn't it wasn't a get rich quick scheme. It was from the word go always going to be a 10 or 15 or even 20-year plan. I didn't have an awful lot of confidence in the super system, and I still don't have a lot of confidence in the super system. And I think it was around the fact that can get tinkered with. And what I quite liked about property, it was something I had some control over.
Sure.
So it was a way of preparing for a retirement. It was a way of creating a legacy. I have 2 children. I am keen for them to inherit what I've got and keep on moving with it. And it was also this idea, I think, of creating multiple streams of income. It did concern me, and it still does concern me, that if you have a job, you basically have one source of income. Whereas, if you've got 20 or 30 properties, arguably you've got 20 or 30 sources of income, albeit maybe not very much from each one. But I did quite like the idea of having multiple streams. And the other thing was, it was always going to be a buy and hold strategy. So it was never going to be, I'm not a renovator, I'm not into that. As I stress, I do enjoy the day job. I love the day job. Property is a vehicle, it's an investment vehicle, as opposed to something that I really want to sort of get my hands dirty doing. So it was a sort of a buy and hold strategy. And I suppose the hold part comes from the point that, you know, the goose that lays the golden egg, why would you sell the goose? You know, if you've got something that's going up in value, you've got something that's continuing to give you, you know, positive cash flow, why on earth would you sell it? So I suppose that was the sort of the motivation around that.
So it was looking at the mechanics of it to move through the fear of what you're actually doing. It sounds like you're sort of not focusing on the, well, I'm actually buying a property here as an investment vehicle. It was, this is an outcome it's potentially going to provide and focus on the outcome.
Yeah, it is all numbers. It is all numbers. And one of the things that I have found with property is it's incredibly forgiving. And what I mean by that, you'd be struggling to find anyone probably in the country who bought a property 20 years ago who's lost money on it. I mean, you may well find someone who bought a property 5 or 6 or 8 years ago who's lost money, but if you can hang on to it long term, and during the hanging on of it, if you're getting a good rental return, then, you know, you're really just waiting for it to appreciate. I mean, I've got some lemons in my portfolio. I've got a couple of properties that I bought in Rockhampton back in 2008. They haven't grown at all. They haven't grown one little bit. I mean, they're in pretty good areas, and they haven't grown at all. I mean, in fact, they've possibly deteriorated a little bit. The reason I don't worry about that, though, is that the rent from the word go was always in cash flow positive territory, still is. So it'd be lovely if I got the double whammy of growth and rent. But as long as I'm getting one of those, then I'm fairly content. So
thinking way back then as well, we've gone through global financial crisis, early 2000s. It was the same sort of media around, you know, growth, unaffordability, then pressure on negative gearing. It was a cycle, and then prices were flat for quite a few years in Sydney as an example, and then there was that growth again, and then the conversations got around to affordability, then negative gearing. It's
exactly.
All of these issues sort of come to the fore, and it's dependent on what's sort of happened just you know, in recent times. But you know, it is a longer term approach, and we've had, you know, in Hobart as an example, and I'm sort of only using it because I'm sort of down here, but you know, owning property across the country, but in the early 2000s, 2005, from memory, we had 59% capital growth as a city, as a capital city overall. Phenomenal growth over a 10-year period, and then it's been flat for 7 or 8 years. So it is a long-term, if you're having that outlook and you're, I suppose, aligning your outcomes realistically against the mechanism, then that probably might help with the motivation and removing fear from the equation.
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, it's a cliche about the sort of the time in the market as opposed to timing the market, but it is a cliche, and it's become a cliche because it's actually got some validity to it. And I think if you are in a market for 20 years, and this is the problem with the press doesn't focus on a 20-year outlook, it focuses on a 24-hour outlook. And so you have to sort of stay away from that and have, I guess, the confidence and the belief that in 20 years or 10 years or 15 years that you're doing fundamentally the right thing, and that these things are going to appreciate. And I mean, they talk about property doubling every, let's call it 10 years or so, but it would be lovely if it doubled sort of progressively over those 10 years, but it doesn't. I mean, those of your listeners who live in Sydney, and Sydney has gone through an absolutely phenomenal boom over the last 2 or 3 years. But to be honest, I bought the family home back in 2001, and it did nothing for absolutely ages. And I mean, okay, so it's doubled now, but it doubled probably in the last 3 years, did nothing for the first, you know, 7 or 8 or whatever. And so I think if it's a buy and a hold and almost a set and forget, then it'll take care of itself.
It's interesting in terms of technology and advancements. I mean, obviously there's time in the market, but it's also great to be able to time the market. And then monetize, so that, you know, it was sort of going back a few years. It was very close to, and it was actually talked about and by property observers and experts as something that you can count on in a lot of cases, is a property clock, and it goes in its cycle of 7 years, and you just have to wait around for it to come around again. And that's completely thrown out the window, I think, these days, and it has been for 5 years, in terms of, is that to do with technology? Is it to do with individual markets? Is it to do with global economies affecting Australia in different ways? But it's also a commoditisation of information. I mean, if you think back into the early days, how hard it was to get sales volumes data, days on market data, yield data for suburbs that you're looking at. That's now a lot more accessible, and it is accessible to a lower or less sophisticated investor. So you've got to stay one step ahead, I think, in a lot of cases, and potentially bring timing back to the market and try and put that forward. But I think,
just going back to your, actually, you were talking about it here, the fears. Sorry, I was going to pick up on that previous point. But go on, Jacob, you've got it here.
I've had a bit of a quick chat with Guy this week, so I've tried to bring groups of the questions together in terms of what you've been asking me to talk about, what I think would be great to hear about, and this is one of them that I really want to sort of hit home around the fears of investing and how have you sort of retrospectively looked back to teach yourself to look at it in a way that you can access, a large portfolio.
Well, look, I think that the first thing, and this was way back in '96 when we started, it was for both my wife and I, and although my wife is not actively involved, she's hugely supportive, and I'll talk on that a bit later, that you need to surround yourself with people who are supportive and people who believe in what you're doing. And there are so many naysayers out there and people who will, not think it's a great idea or whatever. So I think, but from the word go, I think it was very much the sleep at night factor. I think there's no point having investments, and there's no point having a 10 or 15, 20 year plan if for 10 or 15 years, 10, 15, 20 years, you're not going to be sleeping. I mean, that makes absolutely no point at all. And so it's like, well, how do you cope with the sleep at night? And I think the rationale behind going for the lower end of the market was that, well, what's the worst that can happen? Well, if the worst that can happen if I have to sell the thing, well, if it's okay, so if it's a lower end property, based on the just mathematics of numbers, there are going to be more people who can afford to buy that lower end property if I need to sell it. If you've got $1 million or $2 million property, the pyramid is much smaller at the top. There are going to be fewer people looking who are able to buy that property. So the fear was, well, if we have to sell this thing, will there be other people out there who probably want to buy it? And if it's in the lower end, they probably will. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The other fear then is, well, okay, so we can always sell it. Well, are we always going to get a tenant? Well, again, if you're in the lower end, and I don't mean the absolute bottom of the market, and I've avoided housing commission areas and areas where, and that's on, you're very passionate about that part of it. But if there are always people who are going to be able to rent the place, and always a market if you have to sell the place, the worst case, well, okay, well, if I have to sell it, I can. And if I don't, there'll always be tenants. And if for any reason you can't get a tenant, the only reason you can't is right now, this week, the rent's a little high. You've got some control over that, and you just drop it by $5, drop it by $10, drop it by 15 or 20, whatever you need to do to get into the market. So I suppose it was, talking myself out of, what's I think people sort of default to the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and I think that's the sort of theme I'm getting, Guy, in terms of, these are things that could have stopped you acting in the first place, but you're looking at a fear and you're identifying the fear and you're working back to how to solve it. So one of the fears was you don't want to have too many eggs in one basket. You've come back and gone, well, okay, how can I structure my strategy to mitigate the risk of that occurring, and not send it as a barrier to entry or something to stop you even looking at that asset class in its entirety. But yeah, so, and that's a sort of a common theme that I'm sort of listening to you talk, in terms of all of these barriers are not something that's going to stop me in my tracks, and I have to wait until it aligns and things are supplied to me more favorably. It's how can I actually adapt and strategize and really thrive, because this is, I'm just sort of trying to guide, because I know your strategy, and we haven't really covered it in visuals yet, is in that lower price point, so under 300,000 Ks, and it has to be cash flow positive. So you're making money day one, and you're de-risking the capital growth. And I've already had a question from someone talking around waiting is one thing versus what a bank will lend. Sometimes, if you were buying into a basket case or a high variance, high risk, high reward market, the banks are not willing to lend it. Sometimes I've had in personal experiences far higher access to high LVRs and higher LVRs that I was even comfortable with, because the bank assessed that market as a good growth market. Yeah, they work hand in hand sometimes, and so sometimes changing your approach or tact slightly can open the doors up and really remove the fear in the first place.
I think with fear, and I think it's, and I really get it, and I really understand it, and I think the biggest fear is just stepping off the bank. It's just getting the first one. I think it's getting one. Like I said, I bought the first one in 1996. That was by far the hardest one to buy, because it was, yeah, it's the first let's step off the bank into the unknown. And you're never really ready. It's a little bit like having a baby. You know, you're never really ready to have a baby. Yeah. You know, you go, oh, okay, well, we'll have it now. And the first one's the hardest, I think. Well, especially if you've got 8 or 9. Number 9 might be rather tricky. But you know, it's never ready. And I think it's just, and I guess I'm stressing the slowly, just but take action. I think some people just research, thinking that that's investing. No, that's researching. It's not investing. And I'm not saying don't research. Of course, research, but you have to make that first step. You have to step off the bank. I've got a very good friend who unfortunately has never stepped off the bank, and it was the timing was never right. You know, it was before the Sydney Olympics. He says, yes, well, prices are going to drop after the Olympics because it's boomed now, and then interest rates were too high, and then they're too low, and he just can't step off the bank. You know, and whatever gets you to step off the bank, just get the first one and get comfortable with that, and see a bit of positive cash flow. And then go, okay, well, let's just buy one more, and then go slowly, rather than just doing nothing at all. I mean, the time is going to go by whether you do anything or not. Let's just let's take some action here.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to maybe be more complicated than it needs to be in a lot of cases. So, in terms of gaining that confidence to start with, was it around research? How did you know when to take that step, or was it around support framework, or
Well, I mean, back then, I mean, there wasn't nearly the amount of information that there is now. I think I was reading Property Investor magazine, or I was reading some of the magazines that were around just then, and looking at the paper and doing all the things I don't do now, because the research wasn't as freely available. It wasn't out there as much. And so, again, I think that's what sort of leaned me towards, well, let's go to the lower end of the market. Because as I just stressed, if it all fell over, there's an easy exit strategy. And I think it is knowing, you know, if it all goes horribly wrong, what's the exit strategy? And people, but, you know, people say to me, well, you know, what if you lost your job? Well, whether you've got property or not, if you lost your job, you're going to have to try and get another job. So whether you've got property or not, losing your job doesn't really come into, but it does come into the equation if you've got a huge shortfall between the mortgage and the rent, because you're going, golly, I've got to manage the shortfall. And this is the thing with negative gearing. I mean, negative gearing is all fine and well and good, but you're running with a shortfall. Whereas, and to be honest, back in 96, 97, 98, it was harder to find positively geared properties than possibly it is now. And I mean, saying that, trying to find positively geared properties in Sydney is a struggle. But if you go to some of the other areas away from, you know, your doorstep, there are places there. That's sort of taking back things to a very basic level. There's so many thousands of markets in a country, not just each suburb, but multiple markets within each suburb. And you can sort of, you know, Hobart's traditionally been a higher yielding area, maybe slightly lower on the capital growth in the longer term, but at these points when it's quite low yielding and comparatively quite low yielding to itself, and you know, you know, Western Australia City, as you mentioned, are really low yields at the moment, and compared to themselves in its own cycle. So looking and trying to guide your attention towards and giving yourself the network and the tools to be able to potentially invest in other parts of the country that are accessing the outcomes that you're trying to achieve to sync your portfolio. I'm just going to try and change slides here because I've got this as a bit of a placeholder to talk about the nitty-gritty of your strategy and the types of properties you're potentially buying. But I'm also going to do that whilst doing two things at once, which I sometimes find difficult to do. Sharing the actual Frontier Investor website itself and the article that we've got on there. So do check out www.thefrontierinvestor. Let me know if you can see that coming through. This article is a two-part article we did on you know, Guy's journey over the last 10 months in particular. The only point I'm really trying to make here is because it has ramped up from different beginnings, is the types of property, and this is the type of in illustration to the strategy. So a couple of major key points I pulled out, Guy, is all under 300k, most of them in the low 200k range. Yield at purchase. So this one's 5.25% in Ballarat. You know, they're generally around, or the average across all 10 was actually 6.25 according to my calculations. You know, you're seeing a lot of the names that have been in the media or in the investment community over the last couple of years. So the Logans,
coming up.
Yeah.
So 256 purchase here, 300 per week, 6% yield. Generally, good growth. A few that are sort of only come up at 1 or 2%. Some absolute stellar buys. I'm just sort of scrolling down quite quickly now.
Sure.
Where's the one here? Sorry, this one here in Delacombe in Victoria, 40%, 41% growth. So on purchase, 210K, 260 per week rent, and an estimated capital growth of 86,000. And this is.
Now that was actually Jacob, that one was, I guess you'd call it sort of a distressed seller. And this is part of the negotiation thing we'll talk about later, is it has been on for ages and ages and ages. And I think when the property has been on for ages and ages and ages, not only does the vendor want to get rid of it, but to be honest, so does the agent. I mean, when they say the agent works for the seller, well, they do to begin with for about the first week or two, and then they get very tired of going out to the same property, having opening houses, having no one showing up, and so you do get to a point after a number of days when both the agent and actually the vendor are working for you, in that they just want to get rid of it.
Absolutely, and it's about how you front. You want the agent to negotiate on your behalf, and the vendor not to really see the negotiation coming from the buyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Phrase it. I've got a property tonight, which I have found without engaging Guy at all, and I'm just trying to match it to your strategy. I'm trying to define it. I'm trying to get that essence out of it, so we can rinse and repeat it. So people, I think, if they're trying to access the market, if they are, they're getting wrapped up in the negative gearing and affordability conversation, potentially as a first investment. Getting confused. I think your strategy is very accessible. Yields are great. It's putting money in your pocket. You've got the potential for some good growth up front. We can target across the country. We can find potential signs of distress, and we can identify them and negotiate on them. I hopefully have found a property in my search tonight that is going to tick those boxes for you, but we'll see.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, just to go back and say, yes, it is sub 300, and there are lots of areas that can provide that. 6% ideally is the return I'm looking for, and with your tools there, Jacob, I guess it's trying to work out where do you want to invest, and where I don't like the word necessarily hot spots, but where are the places that there's growth potential. And back again, when I first started, it was much harder to get that information. I know you're a big fan of Terry Ryder and some of his work and some of his publications. And in fact, I do follow his recommendations, what he doesn't do, and he'd agree with this. He doesn't sort of pinpoint down into the fine details of a suburb, but once you've worked out areas and there are parts of southern Brisbane, there are parts of northern Brisbane, there's Hobart, there's Wagga Wagga, there's all sorts of places. There are quite a few places. It's then going to, and I use, of course, the Ripe House, and I don't overcomplicate it. I mean, I go to the suburb. The first thing I click on is your sweet spot tab, and which takes us to, I'm looking for the capital gains, which I think is the big blue button, and that immediately narrows down. So when you talk about my strategy, it narrows down the choice. I think what can be overwhelming for an investor is there's so many. It's like, well, where do I bloody start? There's so many of these things, and I think you get sort of analysis paralysis because you then are trying to chase the best deal. And if you're looking for the best deal, you'll probably never find it. By the time you found it, someone else has probably found it. It's already gone. Yeah. So the strategy is I think simpler than that.
And it hasn't sort of been fumbled upon as well. So the logic behind it, and sort of going into a bit of a theory side and input for just a quick question, a quick point. A lot of these areas across the country, we're getting to them at the point where people are moving towards them. There's demand for houses and new population demands coming towards them that's out of cycle and potentially hasn't been priced yet into the cost of property. So that's where our growth is going to come from. But they're only moving towards very particular patches of that place, that town, and only certain types of properties to start with. Obviously, when there's a lot more momentum and people can't be as fussy, they'll sort of spread their wings. But we want to take advantage of the mass momentum and getting before it, and potentially get our exact match with streets and properties to drive the growth forward. and to have that street level growth above and beyond the suburb, then fall back to the suburb once that's been priced into the suburb, and then potentially once that growth in that suburb has been priced into the local government area or even the city, we've had that growth up front, and that might be you've had a lot of growth there, an average 25% return on those 10 properties. I did the calculations, Guy.
Sure.
Annualized return.
Can I also say, Jacob, that the growth is great, but and I do want growth, but unfortunately, and this is where the rental return is so important. You can go broke waiting for this place to grow, and with all due respect to yourself, you're looking at it's crystal ball stuff too. I mean, you've got statistics, you've got numbers, but at the end of the day, you don't really know. You're looking at that and saying,
absolutely.
I mean, Brisbane is a very good example. Last year they were talking about Brisbane, which is going to go absolutely bananas. And well, it hasn't really gone bananas, and so you don't really know when the growth. So you can get as many tools as you possibly can, but I think this is where, if you don't get the double whammy of rental return and growth, let's at least get one of them. Let's get the rental return. I mean, this is where I mentioned before about my 2 lemons I've got in Rockhampton. No, there's been no growth. Now, am I kicking myself about that? Well, I could. But the reason I haven't gone broke holding on to them is that the rental return has been there. Now, when I bought them, people were saying, "Oh, Rockhampton's going to do this, Rockhampton's going to do that," and it hasn't yet, and it may not. But while the rental return there, and they're both not too desperately worried. Yeah,
that's true. It's a very good point. Look, we've had a few questions that might be actually relevant to answer now as well, but I just wanted to really get to the nitty-gritty in terms of. You've seen a variety, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland, in terms of the last 10 properties you've bought in different states. Do you travel and visit and inspect properties, each of them? What are some insurance policies, or how do you actually, mitigate risk in that purchase process if you don't? Just trying to get into some of those.
Yes, I can answer. I can answer that quite quickly. No, I don't go and see the property. For me, it's an investment. It's purely numbers. It's a little bit like if you buy BHP shares, you don't travel down to Wollongong to have a look at the factory. I'm adopting the same sort of approach. So no, I don't go and see it. Saying that, though, I know the bank is going to go and see it because it's their money, so they're going to go and have a look at it. And
I'll load you up to their assessed value. Which is an insurance policy, I suppose, and you're not way off the mark.
And I also pay for the building and pest. In fact, I had a chap go out earlier this week. I've just put an offer. The offer's been accepted on a property in Crestmead, which is I think that's Ipswich. Was it Logan, Ipswich? I think.
Logan,
Logan, is it? Yeah, in Crestmead. But I had a conversation with him. So he's gone out, and these building inspectors, I mean, they go through the property with a fine tooth comb, and they're finding, a crack in this tile, a crack in that tile, a door that's slightly dodgy, and all the things that I would miss. I mean, I can walk into the property and wander around and go, oh, that's nice carpet, and oh, that's a nice chandelier, or that's this and that. I wouldn't have a clue, to be frank. And if I do walk around that property, I'm not going to clamber underneath it, and I'm not going to clamber into the roof. Now I paid this guy, I think, what, $450 to, he was clambering on top of the roof, he was clambering inside the roof, he was underneath the thing. I mean, I get that he enjoys it. He's extremely good at it. But he rang me this morning, and we were having a chat, and he sent me, an incredibly detailed report that all the things that I would never have noticed myself. But saying all of that, I mean, the question I always ask my building and pest people, I say to them, look, I'm an investor. I'm never going to see the place. Is there anything that you found that's a deal breaker? And I say to them, look, is there anything here that's going to cost me a lot of money to fix? And if they say yes, then I will walk away from it. If, on the other hand, they say, well, no, there's some wear and tear here, or there's some wear and tear there, then that's all just part of the package, yes. But no, I don't look at them, but I do trust the people that do, if that makes sense.
I think the important takeaway from that would be a framework that you've developed in terms of the questions that you ask to normalise the results provided by a building pest outcome. Maybe in terms of, you've obviously got a really good result from the Crestmead purchase, but then you sort of hit the nail on the head there in terms of that's the framework. Is there anything that you would feel would be important to me as an investor that would make this a deal breaker, that they sort of feel that onus onto them then to really, that's the bar.
Well, the other thing, Jacob, is that they're also being paid by me, not by the seller. So
Yes.
they're working on behalf of me. You know, if I ask the agent that, the agent goes, "Oh, no, 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 it's fabulous." You know, in fact, it's just a hole in the ground. It's neither here nor there. But the inspector's working for me. And so, you know, to ask him those questions when I'm the person paying the bill, I've never had them push back on that. You know, they will tell me if they see some big things that I should be wary of, whether it be the building side or the pest side. So, I mean, for example, there is some pest damage in the fence of this particular property in Crestmead. My question then is, okay, is there pest in the house? And he goes, no, there isn't. And he said, but there has been a termite treatment done on the house. So he's telling me all the things that I would never have discovered myself. And he's very much working for me.
And this probably comes back to the psychology in terms of, if you did visit that property, you're going to compare it potentially to where you live, the suburb that you live in, and that will bring back into emotion and the normal, you know, human emotions, and fear would then go into, well, I wouldn't feel comfortable potentially living there, but I'm not saying you wouldn't or you would, but you're going to compare it back to a different area, a different property. You're not going to understand how locals live there, or the differences or the subtleties of the market. So it's not really encouraging the focus on the numbers and the outcomes.
No, what I do, Jacob, now with Google, of course, is you can go down and actually walk up and virtually walk up and down the street. So I do that. I will go onto Google, I'll enter the address, and I'll walk up and down the street virtually. I want to see, is there a huge warehouse opposite this house that I'm not aware of? You know, and I can have a bit of a look at the gardens that are around my property. I can even look at, you know, whether there's derelict places around it, or even some of the cars that are parked in the street. So I do walk up and down it virtually through Google. Now, it's not ideal, but it just does give me a bit of a feel. But you're right, I don't want to get emotionally involved in this.
I sort of, we can get into it in a moment in sort of showing where public housing, etc. Public housing is one for me in terms of, you know, burnouts in the street or boarded up houses. That sort of causes a lot of problems with tenants and maintenance issues and etc. etc. That's something you can accept. You can potentially even leverage, which I have done in the past, but not anymore. In terms of, you can see those things. We've got public housing levels within the software, which I'll show in a minute, but even on the Google view, you can see the burnouts on the street. I have a front fence rule as well in terms of front fences usually mean a lot about the type of street or what sort of goes on there, etc. It's a funny one. The other thing is as well, if something comes back on the building pest, which I've sort of talked to other investors, I've sort of done it to a lesser degree, but I've sort of talked through things with investors where they've knocked 5-10 grand off the price. Based on what has come to the fore with building pests. So you might not walk away on that evidence or on that information. You can use it. You can use it to renegotiate because those terms are not fixed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I had a property, in fact, that I bought last month, and the building and pest came back with some things that needed to be fixed. There was some water damage in the bathroom and in the garage, and in fact, the agent went off and got a quote for that work, and the quote came back as a phenomenally high number, because obviously the builder didn't want the job. It came back it was a huge number, and the agent said to me, "Oh, well, look, we could do it cheaper than that." And I said, "Well, look, that might be the case, but I've got to work on this particular number." And we ended up knocking about $20,000 off the purchase price. Now, none of that work is absolutely essential to happen. Oh, there was a tile missing on the roof, I think, but there's nothing that has to be done immediately. But the beauty of that as a negotiation was to go back and say, look, you might be able to get it done cheaper. I've just got to work on this number. And again, by this point, the agent's decidedly over the whole process. The vendor thinks they've actually sold the property. And so it's like, oh, whatever it takes. And I wasn't complete. I mean, with this case, there was, in fact, we actually ended up splitting the difference between the vendor and myself. So we took the 50-50 on that, so to get it over the line. But yes.
I've just got a question here. Just letting everyone know, I actually can't see. I'm not sure what's happened with the software. I can't see people's names coming through in terms of the questions that have been asked. So if you want to just put your name into the question, but we have got a question: does it get expensive doing building and pest for every possible property that you're going to buy? And I just want to probably clarify that first. That you're only actually paying for the building pest as a subject to the offer. So you're making an offer that has been accepted that is subject to building pest. So you're then only paying for the building pest inspection after that point. So you're generally, it's the final tick of the box. The final tick of the box. I like the property. I'm happy with the property. I'm going to proceed. Let's just make sure it's not going to fall down. Another technique that I've used as well, in terms of sometimes building pests are very specific, and it might, with the specifics in there, it might serve to bring that fear back in if you don't have the definite certainties around cost. For minor things, third-party rental appraisals have been a technique that I've used in the past, in terms of having a property manager. You've built a good relationship with them by talking to them about other properties. You've got a little bit of trust there. On the promise of potential future work, they'll inspect the property and tell you, look, you could rent it as is for X amount. If you did this, this, and this, which I reckon will cost about this, $5,000 or whatever it might be, or $3,000, I think we'll get this extra amount rent for, and I'd suggest you did that. On buying, that's sometimes more usable or real information that you can. I would still get the built-in pest, but it's another more emotive or actual practical, in some cases, information. But
yeah, let's move along for a second, Jacob, just quickly. The agent will tell you one price for the rental. It's not very hard to find out whether that's actually legitimate. Realestate.com.au, which everyone's familiar with, you just go on to the rental side of that website and put in the area where you are purchasing, and you will very quickly work out, are there loads and loads of houses to rent? What are those places renting for? How long have they been trying to be rented out for? And so you can quite quickly work out, is there a glut right now? Is there a shortage? And is the price that the agent has said we should get for this about ballpark? And so,
yep. I can also show another way of doing that in a moment as well.
Yes, of course.
I did want to jump in and actually try and apply this methodology and get some actionable outcomes, and try and see if we can get a process that we can rinse and repeat. Before I change screens over and we can jump into the software and see what's happening now, we're trying to find a diamond in the rough. So we're trying to find under 300K. We are looking at individual suburbs. We're trying to find, which I can do in a moment, around what growth potential is, or a growth market. I'm actually trying to answer a couple of questions that people have brought through at the same time that I'm doing this, guy. So we're trying to define a growth market, looking at some indicators of potential for imminent growth. And this is above average in terms of the city. So, some suburbs in Brisbane or some suburbs in Hobart that might be outperforming Hobart generally in the short term. So 1 to 3 years. After that, it starts to get really crystal ball stuff. But 1 to 3 years, we can try and look at some buying indicators of this growth potential. Once we do that, we're trying to get down to the exact streets that are set to amplify that growth. And we do that by looking at the Ripe House sweet spots, which are a combination of low public housing in the street, lots of the in-demand property type that people are asking and paying high, increasing rents for. So new people coming towards the area, people with new jobs, etc. Where are they paying to live? In what types of property? So we're also looking for streets that have above average rent, good tenant demand, and above average yield. So they've come in, they're staying to pay more for rent. That hasn't been represented yet. The market hasn't caught on, and so prices of property, the actual purchase price, hasn't gone up yet. So yields are also going up. Once purchase prices start moving and you have market momentum coming in, the yields will drop. So we're trying to get into these streets where the above average rent, above average yield, and really strong demand. That's what it's all about. In combining all of those things, we've got a really large data set here of where things have moved in the past, and we've been able to retrospectively go back for every property in these streets, say yes, it is in a Ripe House sweet spot. We've been able to average that across all suburbs in Australia and determine that if you get into the Ripe House sweet spots in these suburbs, you're going to amplify the growth around 21.9% in relative terms above and beyond the remainder of the suburb. Not all streets are created equal. It's usually around 10 to 20% of each suburb do qualify. And just in terms, I suppose, this is looking at this time in market, as we spoke about, Guy, but in the 10 years estimated growth in Sydney, it would, if you're that 21.9% is estimated to be around $240,000 in above and beyond growth, just for getting that street area right. I think it makes a massive difference. And also just what we're talking about in terms of the growth potential or growth markets, before we dive in, is just clarifying what we mean by that. A typical market, so Sydney goes in its peaks and its troughs in terms of lots of growth, and it might slow down for a while. We're trying to position a suburb and a local government area is particularly the market that we're looking at, which is going to potentially outperform that market in the short to medium term. And then, it might be new population, a new train line, uni, business park, whatever it may be that's dragging up incomes or population pressure, etc. It might be a big rig circle that the government has drawn around a local government area. Once that is there, we're looking to get into that market and have this above average performance, and then it's going to fall back in with a typical timeline. So I'm just setting the scene there. We're going to now go and have a look at our recent research. What are we seeing numbers-wise? Looking at live data. Let's try and find, sort of just probably opening up the hood a little bit on the May report. We do have a few candidates for this 300K max with positive cash flow from across the country. We're seeing a lot of eyes turn towards Victoria. In the last month alone, we've seen about 7% of investors using our research platform move from researching New South Wales towards researching Victoria. So massive market momentum from investors, not owner-occupiers, but moving towards Victoria and asking more questions there. That's regional Victoria, and it's a 400K price point in Victoria where all the interest is at the moment, and we're also seeing the really nice buy signals for that growth. And we're also seeing very strong and positive things happening here in Tasmania, and it did start at the higher price points closer into the CBD of Hobart. I'm not talking regional, I'm not talking Launceston or other cities, I'm really talking a very focused growth channel through Hobart CBD northwards into a couple of suburbs that we covered off in the report. One of them tonight is going to be Claremont that we're looking at. So growth in Hobart is, it had a lot of heat in West Hobart here, out into Newtown, which is one suburb out, and it's followed that along all the way out now into Claremont, which is the optimum buying window, which we're going to try and find some properties in now. So let me just pause there for a moment, Guy. I'm sorry about getting a little bit off topic there. I'm just going to share my screen here, and we can do some analysis. Some of the fun stuff, if you're that way inclined.
Yes, great.
And I'm just trying to do two things at once again, so I have a few problems doing that.
While you were doing that, Jacob, I did have someone contact me who'd heard about me and what I was doing, was asking about the finance side. Do you want me to talk about that for a second while you're looking around, or not?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that's yeah, go for it. That's really important.
Yeah. So the question was, how do you get finance to buy all these places? Well, again, with positive cash flow, that helps. I also have a job, which also helps. But to be frank, I've always used brokers. And I have had a number of brokers over the years. I've got a superb one that I've been using now for about the last 6 or 7 years. And my approach with finance and brokers has been that, and this was the comment I made to the guy I spoke to earlier this week, was that at the point that the broker says, look, I'm sorry, I can't do anything more for you, that's the time to at least get a second opinion. So go and find another broker, go and have another conversation, see whether that broker has access to funds that maybe your previous broker didn't have access to, but don't take that first refusal as the end of the road, because I think if you've got a creative broker and a good broker, they will find you funds from somewhere. So so yes, yeah.
And this, I probably won't get you to name names, but I don't know. We probably actually sound like we've got the same broker in terms of where we're located and where they are.
Well, I don't mind sharing. I don't mind sharing his name, or at least giving you the website or the email if that's helpful.
Yeah, go for it, mate. Absolutely.
So his name is Rob, R-O-B, Rob Horner, and the email is rob at Jack Horner, as in Little Jack Horner. So it's rob at jackhorner.net.au. So by all means. Different broker, okay. Well, you can share yours as well if you wish, because there are some fabulous ones out there, and there are some ones that do find that they sort of run out of options or run out of pups. So
we going back as well in terms of being knocked back. A good creative broker is so if you want to sort of PM me, I'm happy to talk about brokers, etc. He's been in times. It was the property that the deal was quantified. It was going to be a very good outcome in terms of our assessed value, renovation potential, yields of over 10–11% for individual properties. It was an absolute no-brainer. And at the time, doing contract work, difficult to get finance. Exactly, I've just literally bought a principal place of residence, a real hit. So I had to take a hit as well with a creative broker. I had to take a hit. Interest rate wise, to get into the LVRs that I needed to, and with the deductible incomes, etc. So I think it was about 2% hit on interest rates at the time, which was about 7.5%. So just to get into the deal, and then with the eye of renovating and then refinancing, in a few months' time, etc. That was what it was always sort of going to be about. But it was, is the deal worth it? There's creative ways, there's individual brokers that can sort of help you. That's probably looking outside of the square. And if you're getting a cookie cutter broker, there's brokers and there's brokers. If they're just if they are literally reselling the best loan product that gives them commissions, etc., which in some cases are very large, then they're going to get lazy and they're not going to push the boundaries towards the products that get you into deals. So
exactly. Also, I mean, to be frank, I'm not too bothered about where my broker gets my money from. What I'm interested in is getting my hands on more funds to continue the strategy. So he has a range of people that he gets his. So I'm with all sorts of people. I've got some loans with CBA. I've got some loans with Westpac. I've got some loans with NAB, Macquarie, Liberty, Pepper, all sorts of people. Whoever will have an appetite for what I'm doing.
Same here. Some that I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, exactly.
What we're talking here in terms of look, I'm not going to probably, there's quite a few questions here that we can get back to at the end. I'm not going to try and probably wrap it up, but there's been a few questions around how do we assess growth markets and what are our tolerances for it, etc. I look to a holistic view of property research, looking across the whole country. I like to look at a funnel of properties. The whole country is the top of the funnel. You're going through it at multiple layers. Not starting with a property and ending with a property. I think, going back, there's a lot of sophistication, but it can be very simple in what you do, Guy. In what other people who might be coming at things from a slightly different angle, but it generally doesn't start with a property. We're trying to look at things in context all the way through. I noticed you haven't bought any properties in WA, Northern Territory, ACT in the last 10 months. It's looking at a state level for some context, but then finding individual LGAs that are looking to really driving the state forward. So in some cases, New South Wales is too broad. We want to take a deeper dive. I'm going to use Tasmania as the example here. Tasmania is looking at a healthy part of the property clock. It's at 10 o'clock in the buy zone and the growth area as a state. There are many LGAs, the local government areas in Tasmania that are absolute basket cases. So you can see some of these rural areas that have 400 days on market, 300 days on market. So traditionally, as a state, it's a very or spread out population in Tasmania. So the average days on market for Tasmania is usually very high compared to other states. Okay, that's the one thing. So generally, cities have lower days on market. That's when you're talking New South Wales, where the concentration is around Sydney. As a state, days on market is lower. A lot of people get turned off from Tasmania because of the days on market data, but what they're not looking at is that, say, the city of Hobart itself has 85 days on market. City of Glenorchy, which is just north of the city of Hobart, is 140, and there's individual suburbs within that are in the 30s, 40s, 50s. West Hobart, which is my principal place of residence, is it was down into a couple of weeks. Everything was just selling in the first couple of days or week or so. So there's always exceptions to the rule. It's about giving ourselves a framework to target and to zoom in really quickly on the key LGAs in a state. So we can use this local government area research assistant within Ripehouse to do that. Once we've got a bit of state level context, I like to see a minimum of requirement in terms of market health. Sales volumes trending upwards, that's generally signifying that people are moving towards the area and they're paying and transacting. Yields at a high point in the cycle, so rents have been trending upwards. Growth hasn't occurred yet, so that might be attracting more investors to the market, etc. Yield is a very strong indicator of imminent growth. So I like to see yield at a high point. I like to see days on market accessible and even trending downwards, in addition to sales volume health. We've also got property clock data here in terms of, we've got the city of Hobart is a little bit further developed. It's actually had some outstanding growth in the last quarter. Just incidentally, it's been moving very fast down here. There's way too much heat in West Hobart, in Newtown, which three or 4 months ago were actually would have been having this conversation around West Hobart and Newtown. Is too much heat here. It's already having the growth that we're trying to search for. That's also further around the property clock. The city of Glenorchy is where I'm wanting to draw our attention now to 7 o'clock on the property clock. It's a great time to buy. It's starting to come around into the real phase of the cycle that is where the growth is most likely to occur. The LGA, we're obviously not going to buy a share in the LGA itself and get the even return on investment. We're trying to find suburbs within the LGA. So getting through to the this is, I suppose, how you've got your methodologies for doing this, Guy, but I'm trying to take things through quickly in terms of just the story in Hobart. West Moona is starting to come in towards the city, and it was about 6 weeks ago that was a big green, and now it's actually contracting. It's got too much heat there. So what sort of starts to happen is lots of people are attracted to the area. Sales volume, it clears a lot of the stock out of the market. Sales volume starts dropping. Growth occurs, so yields start dropping. You can see the metric health might have previously been 6, and now it's come down to 3, and it's on the way back down. What we're seeing is Claremont very strong on the metric health, which is the ticks. We're seeing very good income, outstanding yields in Claremont, good investability, so lots of in-demand properties in the Ripe House sweet spot streets, which is really important to actually acquire property. You've got really positive sentiment by the media and experts down here in Tasmania saying positive things about Claremont. And you've also got groundswell and developing and improving interest from other investors like you using Ripe House. So we've got 2,500 page loads a day of investor inquiries, doing research as users of Ripe House and not just the general public, and also not owner-occupier. So it's true market investor momentum that we're tracking. And that's aligning towards Claremont. So, yeah, probably I won't. I'm a bit aware of time, Guy, but I was going to use the city of Hobart as an example, where 3 or 4 months ago it was actually one of our premium suburbs in the May. It was the February report, I think, the research report that we do, and very quickly the heat comes into a market and it closes our buying window. And the window to potentially negotiate and buy under our assessed value it becomes far more difficult. So Claremont is at a time where it's the optimum buying opportunity, I think, to access this growth market, and this tends to close. So it's usually only open for about 3 months is what we've been seeing. So, and this is allowing to still find properties quite reliably, Guy, and negotiate, which is we're going to get your I learn a lot from Guy every time we talk about potentially assessing a property and negotiating on it, and I always sort of write down notes. Yeah, are you sort of comfortable with how I've arrived to Claremont, or any questions on behalf of the viewers, Guy, or you want me to sort of jump into the street level stuff and talk about what I'm seeing?
No. I mean, if that was me right now, I would. We've got Claremont, and there's, as it says, there's 79. Where I personally go, I just go straight into a Ripe House sweet spot, knowing that we're looking for the 3 bedrooms. So I go before I start filtering anything, I just go straight into the sweet spot.
Gotcha.
Tab.
I just wanted to mention quickly, in our May report, we do go into quite a lot of detail, so multiple pages of why we've thought about Claremont. So there's more details in that. It's not just sort of a fluke upon it, or how you've sort of. So yeah, we do try and clarify things there in terms of if someone's, and there's probably 50 other suburbs I would hazard a guess, and not even with exaggerating, would have similar buying characteristics to Claremont at the moment across the country that we could easily get to as well. What Guy's talking about is the Ripe House Sweet Spots toggle, which is the cheat sheet to bring those 5 street level areas together. You can see on the map individual metrics like public housing. Claremont's lower socio. It's actually gentrifying in a lot of ways because of the Museum of Modern Art that's been built out here. A few nice restaurants have sort of been opening up, and it's changing slightly. But you do have areas of really strong public housing here of 28.5%. And that, as we sort of talked about before, it would really drastically change the street appeal of properties and who and how people live there, and adds a bit of variance to the mix. So it's worth avoiding those sort of patches. You can see where higher renting areas are. The darker purple over here near the water is renting higher. You can see exactly where the higher yields are derived. So along the main highway here is generally a little bit yellow and higher yielding. Through Public housing areas and out here towards the water where the purchase prices might be higher, sometimes lower yielding in the dark green. So you can bring all those 5 levels together, and what Guy is talking about is the Ripe House sweet spots, which is this big pop-up here, and there's a lot of detail on this page that we could spend half an hour going into, Guy. I do want to try and get through the Q&As, but this page really makes things easy in terms of tolerances, targeting those streets that have our maximum level or the recommended maximum level of public housing, only focusing on those. You can adjust your tolerances and open it up or close it up, but you can set on the predefined capital growth button up here and apply that and see the exact street areas for properties to target that are potentially going to deliver us that above average growth. You can see that there's 79 properties on the market that's been brought together like Google as a search engine into the one place for you. We're monitoring how many days each property is on the market, and you can order those by the discount amount if you so like. Some properties here have been discounted 11%. You can negotiate on that. You can see days on market and really negotiate hard on that information. As you start to see a lot of heat into this market, the days on market numbers are going to dropping, and those properties that have sat around for a while will start to come off the market. So we're still in the early stages here of when I'm comfortable to see enough signs of growth without that heat developing. What I just wanted to do quickly is, I know our internet is a little bit stressed at the moment down here over Bass Strait, but I wanted to do a bit of a search, and I wanted to put all properties on the market there into those Ripe House sweet spot streets, and I only want to focus on 3-bedroom houses. We want to take all of that noise out of the suburb, as Guy mentioned before.
The thing I would have done there, Jacob, the only extra thing I'd have done there, I would have put a price range of between 200 and 300, but that's the only other thing I'd have done different to what you've done. I would have just narrowed it down. But you don't have to do that, because when they come up on the screen in a moment, anyway, but that's just one way of narrowing it down, obviously, further.
Yep, and I don't think we're going to have many issues over 300 here, but it's a good point. The other consideration with that as well, you might have missed out on an opportunity of a $320,000 property that you could have negotiated, down to 280 or whatever it may be. Let's start here. And this is, when we're talking in the Moray Fields or Cabooltures, where there's hundreds of properties on the market, that's a really good way of doing it, I suppose, to get down to that tip of the needle really quickly. And especially if you've got your eye on multiple suburbs at the same time across the country, you can join them together really quickly in that way and only get down to the half a dozen that you want to look at. It's automatically ordered then it's found 9 properties that fit the bill. It automatically orders them by the discounting amount that's already been applied. You can change that to days on market or price, but this one here at the top, it's been on the market for 392 days already at 269 with 6% discounting. Obviously presents outstanding, very well. What I sort of looked at this one before, which I don't know if it will fit your bill or not, is that it's been on the market since the 16th of April, which is 2015, which is crazy, a long time. It was discounted by 20,000 in October. What the software does, it may have actually come off the market then, and they haven't actually processed a sale. They've taken off the market because of the sales campaign has been compromised or whatever, and then it's come back onto the market again at that same price. So this basically classifies it as the same sales campaign, because I think that knowledge and that understanding is critical to the negotiation process, and a sale hasn't transacted. And you sometimes see these happening over the course of 18 months, 2 years, and a lot of those high days on market numbers, and it seems a lot higher than other sources of days on market data, because we don't start the clock again. If they've stuffed up a sales campaign, the vendors hasn't been managed by the agent or vice versa, and the dynamic's not there, they take it off the market again, and then they get talked into it or they put it back on the market. Sometimes that happens. So this is all about potentially using that information to our advantage. I'm not sure if that fits the bill, Guy. I'm not putting words in your mouth, or would you like me to go down to one of the others?
No, that would fit the bill. I mean, from what we've already seen, I would be ringing the agent and seeing whether initially this is still on the market, and just ask the questions and get the agent talking. So it's been on the market for a long time. I want to find out how motivated this vendor is, because in some cases they're not very motivated. They have decided just to get to sit it out, and they want the price they want. They're not very motivated at all, in which case they're probably not going to discount it any further.
Yeah.
But so I want to find out how motivated this vendor is. I want to find out possibly how long it's been on for. Have they had some contracts already fall over? I saw there on the listing they had the rent of 320. I would probably want a slightly better rent than that. If I'm looking for close to 6%, then yeah, I don't think at 320 and 289, whatever it is,
I think it's just actually tenanted with the reading down here. So it's just tenanted for 320. So the yield's not going to be quite high enough, which we can get calculated in a moment. I can move on to the slightly lower price point, or this one
would be worth a conversation. Yeah, I mean, I would be having a chat about that one.
I've just had a question around the property clock information, which is a little bit relevant. And yeah, it's the property clock data that we're basing this information on is all contained within Ripehouse. So we own our own data sets, and we have a property clock calculation which has got us towards Claremont in this case, which is based on live data. I wanted to show this screen as well, Guy, because the metrics into Claremont, which is part of the picture, this is the market health for the suburb overall. The actual individual metrics that get us to this point to even think about Claremont in the first place, this is diving in under the hood here, and for for the engineer types, etc., with the analytical mind, this is how we base our property clock assessment for a suburb and an LGA is on the actual data, and this is live data. So you can actually see all for sale listings here as instances on a map. You can see sold instances on a map. You can see the yield trending. You can take it off. It's getting a little bit confusing now. You can see it all. And we have our algorithms that automatically calculate the property clock for every suburb and LGA in the country as of today. And the important thing with that is that another property clock, if it's based on the last quarter of last year, etc., it's already out of date when it's published. It's already out of date when it's shared. It needs to be, when the buying window is so tight and the heat comes into these markets very quickly, if we're getting them right and getting that growth, the data needs to be 100% live, is how I sort of phrase it. So this is getting us in here, and this is the type of property that's presented very well, that we want to be the first person to negotiate hard on it. We don't want to be the second or the third or the fourth in the conversation. So you can go off there and get your details. I want to just run through really quickly, Guy, and just do a really quick appraisal and see if it stacks up. Where do you think, it's been on the market for a while, how do you feel about negotiation? Do you find a key comparable, or do you just come in with a massive low ball to start with and just move on? Or
well, to be honest, I've just sat here and done my calculations on and it's rented right now at 320. So if I'm looking at 6% return on 320, I need to be picking this up for 277. So I think it's listed at 280, 289. So I would run a few more numbers as you're doing right now, and just get a bit of a feel for whether 277 is going to make it or not.
What we're also seeing is this is at the top point of the market. So if you think back to maths and quartile pricing, etc., this is above the upper quartile for the suburb. So there's going to be limited comparables in a lot of cases for this property. You've got to be sure of the value and find the comparables that you're comfortable with, especially when you're on the ends of the spectrum like this. I generally like to find comfort in lots of comparables in that commoditized type of property, this is a very nice renovation for the area. It's a premium property. It's a premium renovation. It's in one of the sweet spot areas away from public housing, etc. There's a comparable down here for 260. Obviously, with what you're doing, Guy, in terms of making it work from the yield point of view at 277, still getting the backup from comparables. I mean, I'm struggling to even find something sold here in November for 271. Slightly bigger block size. It's one level brick home. We can see inside if it's renovated or not. I'm just looking at the pictures. Presents reasonably well outside. It's a little bit dry. I think that's probably the weather. Nice yards, well manicured, good street appeal. So it is dated. It's not renovated, but it is tidy. Pretty broad appeal. Unrenovated kitchen. So 271 unrenovated kitchen. Good proportions and good bones. Good quality product. That may be a good, give us a little bit of confidence for a 277 vow. Especially when you see, and probably the point I'm making, guys, 225 here, which recently sold, is renovated. Polished floors. I think we're going to have to be very careful and specific of that vow for 277. So this is presented very well. The street area might be different. It might be worth and being a little bit safer in coming back at that lower price point in the suburb.
I will go in with a low verbal. Sometimes they want to go to the vendor with a contract. Now, to go to the vendor with a contract signed involves a little bit of work on their end. So I will go in with a low ball and say, look, this is a cheeky offer. Is it worth even putting this in writing? And if the vendor at this stage, if the agent at this stage thinks that there's an opportunity of getting rid of this property that's been on forever, they'll take you up on it. But on the other hand, if it's just going to be a complete and utter waste of time, then for example, this one that's been reduced down to 289, to go in at 220, for example, I don't imagine that would even get. I could be wrong whether it would even get a look in. But
and so maybe this is a reasonable comparable here at 257. We can spend a little bit more time going through them individually. There is arguments for that 271 as a valid comparable as well. So maybe coming in around that 270 mark, we've got some comparables in and around that. The yields would then be 6.2, 6.3. It is still at that higher price point in the suburb. I suppose it's not getting put off by the actual listing price, because obviously it's out on the market for quite a while, but actually just assessing the value without even looking at that. Using these couple of comparables, 271, 257, I'm pretty comfortable with. This one here at 260 is renovated again, so around that 265. I'm comfortable there. We can go on that for quite a while. That's going to take those top 5 comparables. It's going to average them. It's going to then apply some adjustments based on location. It's having a bit of think about this because it's going through a lot of data in Claremont, and the internet's been shared at the moment. It's a little bit too far away from schools. Shopping, transport's not relevant. Everyone's got a car out there. This particular property is in just at the top part of our range of 15% max in public housing. So there's a slight negative adjustment. So we've just got to remember, if you want to take this as gospel, there might be some negative adjustments to be made to our comparable analysis based on the location. So I usually work and I start off with actual comparables as the point of truth. And then I potentially would use these as negotiation points with the agent to just say, well, look, I'm a little bit worried about distance to closest school here in public housing. I'm only willing to go in at 245. That's how extra weight I would use in my negotiation in best case scenario.
And Jacob, in that situation, I'd actually misread the price. I thought it was 289, so it's 269. Yep. No, I would go.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Sorry, I thought it was 289, and that's where I thought the 27, whatever I said. No, at 269. Yep. No, I would go around where you just suggested. Yep.
Yep. Beautiful. I'll check the comments, but probably people have picked up on that as well. But yeah, 289 started off live, 269. So our comparables are right on the money there in terms of asking. If we can negotiate down lower than that, based on the time on market, negotiate hard. I would sort of deem that as reasonably confident of being undervalued.
Yep.
And that's then effectively we've manufactured really good yields. Just on asking price, then that's about 6.1%. I suppose. Just want to flip back to the slides a little bit, Guy. In terms of, I am really aware of time and getting to Q&A. I did have some more. I'll just close all this down. Comments around making things happen. As a bit of a recap, It's coming back to clear, concise thinking, taking action. I think is probably the key takeaway. Would you agree from what you've said earlier on? That was my takeaway from what you said.
Yes, and I think it's looking at what are the obstacles that gets in the way of you taking action. So it's sort of trying to go to a quiet place and go, yes, I know I need to take action. What is it that's getting in the way of me taking action? What would be the things that would need to be right for me to take action here? And we're all different on that. But exactly, if no action is taken, then it's just been research with no investment taking place.
I'm sort of getting back to the psychology of it because I really did want to give you a plug for taking the time out and empowers and really giving such insight into how you operate and what you do. The psychology of it is critical to what you do in your day job, which is management, training, supervisor training, staff development, business development. So you're working with small, medium, large businesses in helping staff via the trainingguys.com.au.
Yes, and it's more training as opposed to coaching. I don't do one-on-one coaching in my work. It's the organizations that you can see there are fairly large. I'm working with groups of 10, 12, 16, 18 or so participants for a length of time, which can sometimes be 4, 6, 8 months. So, so it's not so much the one-on-one coaching. Yep. It's more working with groups of managers who traditionally were very good at what they previously did before they became managers. Now they've suddenly got a small group they're looking after, and they really haven't got much clue, unless they had good mentors themselves along the way. So it's working with those people who are new into the role, having been good at what they previously did.
I probably have to make the point, if you've got any questions to ask Guy directly around property and acquiring property, his portfolio, motivation, etc., do direct them through me, and I'll collate them up, and I'll get answers from Guy and get back to you, and we can even put them together into another webcast and go through them that way. And if you'd love to reach out to Guy for business and what he does in his day job, and potentially talking more on that, then definitely reach out here to the trainingguys.com.au. So just wanted to clarify and really value sort of Guy's time for helping us through things tonight.
Pleasure.
The two channels. Look, before we get to Q&As, Guy, I just wanted to go through a few things in regards to the software, and this is probably something that there's a lot of other people that use Ripehouse in terms of, obviously, Guy here on the right as an investor, professionals in the industry and educators and people using the software to help make critical and clear decisions in timely nature. Ripehouse is a subscription service. Okay, so everything you've seen tonight in terms of the software is accessed via subscription. That's usually $997 a year. And tonight, as a big thank you for coming along and hopefully getting something from it, I'd love to offer a discounted amount of $300 off that amount, bring it down to $697 for that annual subscription. So that gives you access to everything you've seen tonight in terms of all of the research tools, live chat and support from our staff here. Sorry, my staff. We've got a different business, Guy. In terms of helping you through using the software and making these clear and concise decisions in supporting that. So it's not just software in isolation. We also release reports that help you digest and make these decisions. So as part of the bonus offer tonight, I'd love to also extend you our May edition, which actually released today up into the platform, which is live. Absolutely our expert understanding of the market as it sits today. It's about 100. It's just over 100 pages of research, so you can skip to the key bits that you look for, and to bring it all together to make it make sense. And even before you're actually ready to invest, it's worth getting the reports and digesting them, and then coming along to our monthly investment group coaching, which is all provided, usually $347 if you were to buy it off the shelf. It's included in this offer tonight to get you on your way. If you're still a couple of months away from potentially getting ready to go, we'll basically vet what you're trying to do with your strategy, get you in the right direction in terms of the report and the suburbs within it, towards the suburbs that might give you the upside to what you're trying to do, and then bring those along to the group sessions once a month. And we will personally go through the suburbs and properties that you've come to and guide and improve and refine, just like you have seen tonight. So that's all included. It is only available until 11 o'clock tonight via www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. Usually that is all separate and not part of the deal. So as a big thank you, I'd love to include that for coming along. Just so that you know, it is coming up to tax time. This can be utilised as a cost for educational expenses that can be claimed in some cases against your investment property income. And I just probably wanted to reiterate the fact that you're not alone in terms of we have live chat integrated into the page, 1300 phone support and email support. And you're going to see my mobile and email number. I try and keep myself as accessible as I can, and in terms of what is needed from you to get you moving, get you taking action, removing fear and looking at the numbers and having that clear and confidence in taking and getting the next property into your portfolio. Just probably wanted to reiterate there before we jump into Q&A. All payment is processed by Stripe, which is industry best practice in terms of security. And yeah, to get this to offer and everything I've talked about, you can jump across now to www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. Guy, thanks for sticking around and opening up your time potentially for a few Q&As. I am aware that we've gone way over time, Guy. As I mentioned,
are there people still there, Jacob? Or are they all gone to bed?
We've got lots of questions. It is getting towards bedtime. I know you're away at the moment as well, so you've got to get your rest. But what I can do as well is gather them together and come to you in groupings of them, and I can sort of get the answers back to individuals. So if we don't get to you tonight as well, I'll gather all that together. This is my personal details and contact information on here. Just a couple of questions. I'll work down in order of as they're sent in now, working backwards. And there's going to be some that are very subjective, guys. So I won't sort of. If I don't get to your question, I'm sticking around now to answer chat that are related to individual suburbs or requirements that are not going to be obviously used to everybody. But Guy is calculating his yield calculations. I'm assuming is that just rent times 52, Guy, and then divided by purchase price.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's giving
yes, and I want to be getting. I'm punting at 6, looking for 6%. If it's a tad below, but it's a marvelous house with lots of growth and lots of potential, then I will take that. But I'm shooting for 6% plus.
Yeah, and that's obviously that's gross yield. So not taking prices, not inclusive. We're calculating our yield at 6% on purchase cost without stamp duty, etc. I guess that's...
And actually, just to mention also, this is the challenge when you're buying units, because when you're buying units, the strata costs, there's various levies, there's various other costs that can quickly add up. And so a unit may look quite good when you consider the rental and the purchase price. But when you take those other things, which break down into a weekly component, and take them off the rent, the returns may not be quite as good.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, the next question is probably a little bit different. Is it a concern that's been on the market for so long? That's very subjective in terms of the days on market is quite high there, but there's a lot of factors that can go into a sales campaign that can really blow it out or screw it around, or it may have actually been off the market. I guess that's doing the due diligence in terms of your insurance policies, Guy, building in pest, making sure it's just focusing on the numbers. And if you can negotiate a good deal, it doesn't matter if it's been on the market for a day or 360. If you can still negotiate and assess value and negotiate under, then that's all positive. There's a few questions around Victoria from Michael. One there, I can probably get to that afterwards. Bendigo would be probably where I'll be looking for sub 300 in Victoria at the moment. Also, just over 300, you've got northern Geelong, or just under or around 300, you've got northern Geelong areas. I'm sort of liking what we're seeing there in our research for Geelong. Frankston probably a little bit above that, 350. And that's sub 400 is the vast demand. Frankston is actually our highest per dwelling demand for investors at the moment doing their research. For a suburb, Moreton Bay is the highest LGA. As a total. So interesting sort of facts, but a vast majority of investor interest at the moment is that sub 400 band in Victoria. Group coaching is all done online. So we open up whoever's on the line coming in, jump on the webcast, we go through, we pre-vet your properties and talk through them so we can get right into the meat of it in each coaching session. And they just keep going, and you can come and go when you're ready to do your bit, or you can wait around and engage with everyone else's properties, and we can create a really meaningful and I suppose buoyant's probably the right word, but it's everyone gets a lot of benefit from talking and seeing other properties that are coming to the table, which is very useful. Comments about the property clock methodology. 20% deposit, Guy, or do you use LMI?
No, I go to, I see, sorry, deposit. Well, I'm trying to only put a 5% deposit down as far as the contract is concerned, as opposed to 10%. So I'm trying to get away with 5%. The LVR, yeah. Look, if you can do better than 80%, fantastic. I actually don't mind paying a bit of insurance, because if you are, you're using less of your own money to purchase this place. So yeah, I will go to 85% or even 90% if I can, and pay the insurance, because I think that's just the cost of doing business, and it usually stacks up and makes more sense to do that than wrap up more of your own cash in it.
It depends, and that probably comes with comfort and experience in terms of knowing, yes, you can get in. There's results I've been able to generate from using other people's money, or getting into another deal, being able to amplify that, and with that confidence, you're able to then, as you sort of mentioned, LMI is a price of doing business. If you've had those results and you've been able to quantify them in the past, I suppose I've had a bit more of a bias towards renovate for profit in my portfolio. Sure. And I've then seen the types of property. I've been able to assess value, and I've seen comparable properties once the renovation is done. See that as my profit margin up front, and then I see the LMI costs as the cost of doing business to get that profit. So which changes things a little bit. But other question here, so I don't have the name on this. A few of you have put the names in. When you're purchasing a property, are you buying a set type of property, or does it change per area? I think we both want to answer.
Well, actually, I mean, when you look at a suburb on Ripehouse, it will say at the top there what's in demand, and more often than not, it's three-bedroom homes. So more often than not, I am going with three-bedroom homes, or sometimes four. But more often than not, they're three-bedroom in the areas that I'm looking at.
There's probably two ways of looking at this. In terms of, I think it's critically important to buy the in-demand property type that people are demanding to live in that suburb, and that's generally, it may be the people who have lived in that suburb for the last 50 years have all chosen to have four-bedroom acreages, but the new population that's moving towards the suburb, they might be owner-occupiers, but the new people who are driving rents and yields forward, and what we need as investors are actually choosing to live in two-bedroom apartments. That's the most in-demand property type with the tenant demand attached to it that we need. So that's what we potentially need to focus on. And then you need to ask yourself, are you comfortable with units, and does that fit your strategy? And if it's not, you're not comfortable, then you might need to move on to the next suburb, and then find one that the property class that's most in demand suits your strategy. Yeah, I think there's probably two ways of looking at it. I think we're getting through. There's quite a few subjective ones in there. Would you invest in New Zealand? I think that's a whole other topic of conversation.
Well, it is a whole topic of conversation. Coming from the UK, people ask me, would you invest in the UK? I guess my response to all of that is there is so much opportunity here in Australia that to look overseas and have to deal with all the various laws and ramifications and tax and this and that, I just think there's plenty here. It's like people who were investing in the States 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sure they've done very, very well, but for me, yeah, I think there's plenty of opportunity in our own backyard without having to go too far overseas.
I generally agree. And my sort of example was a very specific example. It was actually through my broker who offered a deal for me in the UK, which is where he was from. It was, from memory, about 25% yield. It was like a $20,000 two-bedroom unit at 25% yield. I thought that sounds outstanding. Growth was impossible for me to comprehend and to quantify, but the yield is outstanding, obviously. That's only on a small amount, $20,000, but I couldn't borrow money against that and amplify that at all. I didn't really need to. But then when you're coming back to Australia, that's where your income is based. You're potentially able to access a lot of other people's money. The opportunity cost it changes dramatically when you're putting $4 of someone else's money in with one of yours, or whatever it may be. So I just basically weighed up what I could do here in Australia with what was available to me, and then those percentages and those numbers didn't work. If I was trying to take, if I was at the point that was quite a few years ago, when it was all about growth for me, and getting that growth as soon as I could. If I have a lot of equity built up and I'm then really making a yield play, Obviously, those type of investments are a different kettle of fish then, and I'm not willing to then increase my loan to value ratio at all going forward. You know, to a completely different sort of. I suppose it's a very subjective thing. Look, we could. I'll gather these up. If you've got any more questions, please don't hesitate. This is my email address. Bring the questions around property through me. You can gather and get in contact with Guy around his day job, and if there's any way he can assist there via thetrainingguys.com.au. But a big thank you. Take this opportunity just to really thank on behalf of everybody else, Guy. Thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom with us.
A pleasure, Jake. A pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'll talk to everyone soon, but thank you for tuning in. And yeah, more information around the special offer at www.ripehouse.com.au/bonus. Thank you.